Good evening and welcome to the Lessons of Vietnam by North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated. I am Bill Dixon here with my co-host, Mr. Bob Matthews, or as we call him, our educational czar. He was 40 years as a teacher. Our guest tonight, we got snowed out last time, and our guest was to be General Norman Gaddis, who was a POW. We were looking forward to having General Gaddis come in, but he had a conflict tonight, so we had Bill Tschudy, who was on for a little while a couple shows ago, but unfortunately right now our POW is still MIA. So we're waiting for Bill to get here, but in the meantime, I just wanted to bring up a couple of events that's coming up. By the way, call in and ask Bill some questions or Bob some questions or make comments or whatever you like, and you can call 919-518-9773. For those of you who don't understand military, that's 919-518-9773. Call in and ask some questions, be part of the show. We're going to have Norman Gaddis in our next show coming in, and after that we're going to have another special guest who's an author. His name is Gary Turner. Gary is the cousin of Joseph Hargrove. Joseph Hargrove was one of the 3 Marines that got left on the islands of Kong Tan after the Marquez incident, where they went in to get the sailors that were captured by the Cambodians, and we lost a lot of Marines. 3 helicopters shot down, I think it was. But Gary's been back to Vietnam several times, to Cambodia, several times trying to find the remains of Joseph Hargrove, his cousin. And I'm not going to go too much into the story because it's a story with JPAC and talking to Cambodians there and the family and the information they're getting and the lack of information they're getting and the misinformation they're getting. But we'll let Carrie talk about that when he gets back. Also, this coming Saturday, if you're in the area, North Carolina Vietnam Veterans has met the first Saturday of every month at 12 o'clock noon. We're working on 27 years now. We keep practicing. We're going to get it down right. We will be holding our POW-MIA ceremony where we call out the names of the 41 from North Carolina who's still missing in Southeast Asia. When we started 27 years ago, Bob, we had 65 names. Now we're down to 21. And we'll continue reading those names until everybody comes in. And we'd love to have different organizations come in and read the names or with us. So we got American Legion out of Newbern coming up in May to read the names. And so we're always looking for organizations, veterans organizations, civic organizations to be part of it, because we think it's very important that we remember those men who are still unaccounted for and their families who are looking for closure. Bob, you've been there quite almost every ceremony since it was started. Tell us a little bit about the ceremony and what it means and the crowds we have, or whatever you want to tell them.
Well, Bill, I take extra pleasure in going to the ceremony as often as I can. And you're right, I've been to most of them as you have. It's very special to me because part of our course, Lessons of Vietnam, has always been to never forget their names. It's easy to do that. You get on with your life. You say you put it by, I'll go the next Saturday, I'll go this Saturday. But we go every Saturday. We have read their names in Vietnam. Years ago, when I took the first group of teachers to Vietnam, we went to the old embassy, the one that's very famous, that was stormed during Tet. We went into the courtyard of the embassy. It was really run down and everything. And Mike Lynch was with me, one of our members. And I had in my pocket right here, which I always carry, the names of our fallen. We held hands around the flagpole and we read the names. And when the people read the names, different groups read them. They read their name, where they're from, the service they were in. And it's like we've given them an extra day of recognition. Their families show up and things like this. It's very special. We do several ceremonies during the year, but the first Saturday of every month at high noon is special to us and always will be. 27 years going on, and we pledge to do it until all the names or remains are found, returned home for a proper burial. And I don't know if we'll make it, but we're going to try.
There's another special time coming up, March 29th or March 30th. If you go online and look up for National Vietnam Veterans Day, some people celebrate it on the 29th, some of them on the 30th. But we will be holding a special ceremony at the North Carolina Capitol at 6 o'clock on the 29th, calling out the names for the National Vietnam Veterans Day. And then we're going to get together and go out to one of our favorite Vietnamese restaurants, The Lot, and see the good folks over there and eat a little bit of pho and some spring rolls. And so that's coming up. We are invited to that. North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated also is now a commemorative partner. The Department of Defense has started a 50th commemoration anniversary of the Vietnam War from the day it started until it ended. And we are now a commemorative partner. If you go online, 50th anniversary of the Vietnam War with commemorative partners, or commemoration. My southern tongue still has problems with those words. Commemoration, and you can see all the things that are going on all across the country. There's different organizations all across the country are doing different things, having different functions, from dedicating new education centers to having the wall come in to just about anything you can think of. Such as our POW ceremony coming up. So we'd like to invite you to check online. We are on Facebook, North Carolina Vietnam Veterans on Facebook. You can check on Facebook sometime and see our what's going on. We also have our website, which is ncvvi.org, and you can go on that and see the archives of this show if you miss them, or you can go to nissancommunications.com and see the archives, and also see what else we're doing and some of the news that are going on in veterans environment and so forth. And you talk with a little bit with, we had a very special guest Friday night, by the way. We had a special showing of the Etchings in Stone play that Ron Harris wrote, and we're going to have Ron in to talk a little bit about the play and show you a little bit about the play. But Friday night we had the North Carolina premiere, and we had about 100 people there. We had a couple special guests. Bill Tschudy, our guest tonight, when he gets here, was our guest, and we had a very special guest on top of that. We had Alex Rowe, who was Nick Rowe's son. Well, tell them a little bit about Nick Rowe for those who don't know, and Alex and so forth.
The Nick Rowe story is very special to all of North Carolinians, and especially NCVVI, because most of you know we talked about it before. If you're watching the show, of course, call in at any time. But the Nick Rowe story, Nick was one of our members years ago, and was a POW in Vietnam, one of the 38 POWs that escaped captivity and come home and talk about it. And Nick wrote a book called 5 Years to Freedom. As Bill has mentioned many times before, Nick eventually got out of the service, went back into service, and started a school, our survival school at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. Eventually was commissioned to the Philippines to work on counterinsurgency to stop communism there. And Nick was assassinated in the Philippines when he was 51 years old. He was a Colonel, Nick Rowe, then. Well, Nick's son, Alex Rowe, teaches right now social studies in Benson Middle School in Benson, North Carolina. And Alex came to our show Friday night, as Bill mentioned, as our special guest, met all of us, has heard quite a bit about our trip to Texas to his dad's namesake school. Very interested, was very, very pleased to see him there. And he will be visited by us in his classroom when he started to teach Vietnam to his students, a social studies teacher. And Bill has mentioned also, when you go on ncvvi.org, we have updated that site quite a bit. And for many of the teachers listening, we have on there, when you slide down the menu on the left side of the site, you'll see lesson plans. And if you go to lesson plans and click on there, we have a 52-page turnkey course on CD on how to teach Vietnam in American schools. A lot of information there you can't find in the books, a lot of objectives, discussions, different things for your students, student activities in the classroom, all kinds of things you can do on there. And it's self-taught. So many of our teachers that want to teach Vietnam but don't know how to start, this is a good place to start. ncvvi.org. But getting back to Friday night, we had several guests there, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think you'll hear more about Etchington Stone very soon. And while we're waiting for Bill Tschudy, we're going to tackle 2 questions tonight. So if you want to call in before Bill gets here at 919-518-9773, we have 2 very, very political and ticklish questions. And one is the recent move to free a man named Bowie Bergdahl from Afghan prisoner of war camp, a trade of some of the terrorists we have in captivity at Gitmo. We think it's in the wind. We're not sure. They've talked about it for several years now. His parents have been on the news. We want to ask Bill Tschudy this also, and ask you, what do you think of this tentative proposal of trading POWs for a prisoner of war, getting one of our own back? It's a very tough question to think about, but we like you to think about it. And Bill, being an ex-POW, will have a very candid opinion of this.
You know, Bo, I think we ought to get Bo home any way we can, but at the same time, it worries me that we're putting a target on all military's back that they come along and be kidnapped or snatched or whatever you want to call it and held for ransom or other prisoners. I still think we are to get him home some way or another, but I'm just afraid I'm a little bit scared of that Pandora's box.
I am too, because there are nations in the world, Bill, that will not negotiate with terrorists. They will not talk to them at all. If you're a terrorist and you're a wanted terrorist and you're in captivity, you're basically done. Yeah. Now, the second question tonight we're going to talk about, Bill and I have talked about this before many times, and I want to get Bill Tschudy's opinion on this, is on the wall in Washington, D.C., there are 58,375 names. They add names every year. The question is, should suicide victims be on the wall? Most people say no, but before you say yes or no, think about it for a minute. I'll ask the question again. Should men or women, but especially men this time, that committed suicide after the Vietnam conflict, because of Vietnam, be put on the wall? It's a tough one. There is a plaque now, Bill. You explained the plaque that's there now by the flagpole?
That's for people who died as a result of the war who are not on the wall, the in remembrance plaque. That's the criteria. Basically, is that you were killed in country. From the way I understand, I'm not exactly certain for this. I think if you were wounded and died later, a year later, you're not on the wall. But there has been a movement to get some of the people who did die later of injuries being able to have their names on the wall. But we're almost going to have to build another wall just for the extra names that we have.
It's delicate because when I bring it up, some of the vets get mad at me. They say, "Just leave it alone." Why not? I leave nothing alone because I like to bring up everything for the students. And one of the hallmarks of this course, Lessons of Vietnam, was to take the students and the adults to an area where they've never been. I mean, put them in a situation they've never been in and make them think, make them ask critical questions, make them be you, trade places with them. I mean, how much better can you be when you bring someone in like a Mr. Bill Tschudy to sit in his chair next to us and give you the chance, the viewer, to talk to somebody, not second-place history, not second-hand history, first-person history, a primary source, a man that was in captivity for 7.5 years. Pick his brain. Ask him questions. What was it like? What was it like coming home? What was it like there? Ask him anything you want. And Bill, as all of us will always say to the viewers, if there's a question I don't want to answer, then they will not answer it. I believe Bill Tschudy is coming in.
I think so. We were just in Lenore, North Carolina, speaking to high school students there, and we got a question that wasn't needed to be answered, and we just told a young man that we talked to him one-on-one a little bit later, and kept on with our conversation and so forth. So,
You know, the thing was, Bill, that question was, and I think everybody knew the question. He said, how many people did you kill in Vietnam? Well, I walked up and took the microphone and talked to him very closely and said, never ask that question again in public. That's for private. He sat down. We went from there.
Stay there.
So,
our MIA POW is now here. So I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Bob Matthews here and our education czar and talk to Bill. And like I said, call in 919-518-9773 and ask Bill some good questions.
Hi, welcome back to Lessons of Vietnam. Our guest, Mr. Bill Tschudy, our honored guest, has arrived, and we're going to pick up with a little bit where we left off the last show. This is the series, Bill Tschudy Part 2. Now, Bill, the first thing I was telling the audience earlier that one of the hallmarks of the course we put together called Lessons of Vietnam is to allow the students to talk to people that actually walk the walk. Because most of the time, whether you're in college or high school, your teachers are learned instructors of something they weren't part of. They learned about it, like when I teach the Great Depression or the American Revolution, I read as much as I can about it and try to do the best job I can. Well, one of the reasons the Lessons of Vietnam is so critical is there's a tendency now in all the schools in the country, getting back to basics in school of critical thinking, using first-person history, using people that actually did what they're talking about, like Mr. Bill Tschudy. So, Bill, one of the first questions, and I posed it to some of the students before, is I asked them in the classroom to be you. And I asked them to be me. I said, for instance, think of yourself as a 21-year-old man getting on a plane in Oakland, California, going to Vietnam. What goes through your mind? So when I asked them to be you, they gave me a whole list of questions.
oh, okay.
So my first question to you would be this, Bill, when you got home from Vietnam after your years in captivity, what did your friends ask you? Or were they a little afraid to ask you anything?
What did they ask me? They didn't really ask me anything. I think they were a little... it wasn't a time when you'd sit down and say, well, let me tell you about this or that. What I found out mostly was that I was talking with my friends about what they have done.
I understand.
And my recollection is now, I remember it's like looking at a tree. I'd start a question, say, what are you doing? And they'd say, oh, nothing different. And then I'd say, well, ever since I was over at headquarters, I do, oh, you were at headquarters. Yeah. Oh, and then, well, it was nothing but branches that went out. Never got any answers.
Because I would think when you come back to the people that you know and care about after being gone that long, they would be a little apprehensive, a little nervous, not to hurt your feelings, or maybe they didn't know what to ask because maybe they thought you were angry or bitter or whatever.
Well, first of all, the first thing was they didn't know what to expect when we came back.
Of course.
They really didn't, and I didn't have any idea because we all thought we were very normal. And my immediate group had all kinds of things. One of them thought I probably had lost all my hair, and another one thought that I may not know good food anymore, and all kinds of strange things. I said, "Hey, come on, we're just real people," you know. And my wife said, "I did." And one of the things they didn't know was how mentally stable were we. They didn't know. I mean, you wouldn't expect that the government would have let us go if we had some sort of mental problems. But my wife said, I didn't know what he was going to do or anything. And in fact, I'll tell you, she was amazed at my appetite. We were at the Naval Hospital in Portsmouth, and it turned out that the CO of the hospital was quite a chef, and had wine and everything, and he fixed special meals for us every night.
And he should have.
And my wife said one night they came in and said it was spaghetti, and I said, "Oh, I'm not very hungry," and they brought this plate in that was like a mountain, and I ate the whole thing, and she said, "But you said you weren't hungry." And I said, "That's right, but it was on the plate, and you always clean your plate."
There you go. Well, you know, Bill, it was a pleasure for me, I'm sure all of my fellow veterans, to meet your wife Friday night. We were talking before you got here about the Etching in Stone play, and to meeting your wife, what a wonderful woman.
Yeah, she's my secret weapon.
Yeah, I see that.
I keep telling her when things like this come along, I said, "Listen, they're tired of hearing me and they want to hear you." No.
Oh, that's true. That's true. We talked about that. But we said, I wonder if Mrs. Tschudy would like to talk about some things. And I sat down, and I was very fortunate. Friday night, I had a nice conversation with your wife.
Uh-huh.
And what a lovely lady.
Yeah.
I said, "Boy, Bill Tschudy is a lucky man."
Yes, indeed. Yeah, that's true. And she can converse as well as anyone. She just has this thing about, I just don't like to, talk. I'll forget, and things like that.
Well, Bill, when you were coming home and you were finally settling in to, I guess we'll call it a normal lifestyle after your captivity in Vietnam, what did you find was the hardest thing to adjust to?
Well, right off, the hardest thing was to make decisions. For 7.5 years, I had people making decisions for me.
Sure.
And it was really, people would come up, "Bill, hey, why don't you and Janie come over for a drink tonight?" I'd say, "Oh, I got to ask Janie."
Yeah, sure.
And I had we each had an aide that was a person of equal rank, and they kind of looked after us, took us to the DOV to get our driver's license, and did all kinds of things like that. It was like having an aide. And I "Don, you've got to tell me, can I do this or can't I?" They'd say, "Do you want to come down and have your teeth fixed now?" And well,
sure. Yeah.
And so anyway, that was the tough part of it,
Mm-hmm.
is making decisions. And then after that, my wife was amazed because she deferred to me quicker than she would have imagined, having grown up with our son, who was just about 8 when I came home. And she had him from the time, all 8 years. And so she made all the decisions. And I got to tell you, this isn't me. He's the blonde guy, and he was very interested in all kinds of things. And while I was at the hospital, this is just about a week after I came home, I was over at the hospital. And suddenly there was this phone call. They said, "Commander Tschudy, you got to, this is your wife is on the phone." And I'm on the phone, and she says, "Mike cut his hair. What should I do?" And I said, "What do you mean he cut his hair?" "Well, he just clipped off the front of his hair." And we had a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist was up there, and I told him, he says, "Oh, well, this is something." He said, "Bring him over right away." So Janie popped him in the car and drove him over to the hospital. Then the psychiatrist took him off and spoke to him, and my hair was very short, and so we thought, well, maybe he's trying to look like Dad.
Could be.
And all kinds of things going through our minds. I have no idea what the psychiatrist asked him, but anyway, we never really found out, but he was happy. And it wasn't until he was close to 40 years old that we finally said, "Mike, why did you cut your hair?" He said, "I didn't want to go to the barber."
A big mystery, right? All those years.
All those years.
Boy.
Yeah. So anyway, that has a lot to do with POW camps.
It does. Making decisions.
Yes.
Well, Bill, when there's, I don't know if it's a misconception or a reality, but a lot of people, when they talk about this issue, they are a little nervous about what to ask and what not to. And they wanted to know, since you guys were in such close proximity for all those years, after it was over, and you come back and relax in the civilian life, did you keep in contact with a lot of your brothers?
Yes, we did, and we have a kind of an internet network. It's called POWNet.
Yeah.
And we have that, and so you're getting all kinds of information from people. It was just like being in Vietnam, because all of a sudden we'd have these big discussions over things that we had no control.
That's like Vietnam, right?
and then we also sort of became, it became kind of political. And so finally they said, "No, let's keep the politics off. You can do that back channel if you want."
Sure,
But,
sure.
So that was way. But and then just by chance you might be in a community where some of your ex-POWs were. But I don't know. It's just like when you were in any kind of organization, like in high school or your basketball team, whatever it was. You had this close relationship. You did everything together, and then you went out. But you always knew that if I had to do something, I could call Bob.
Yep.
And tell him, I got this problem. At least we thought we could.
Sure.
And so you really sort of, without even conversing, we really thought we were close.
You're tight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we talked the other day, and you mentioned before to some of the guys that when you went down with Jeremiah Denton.
Yes.
And after you got back and so forth, you mentioned at the other night when you were talking that he went on to become a senator and all that, and he was a renowned, well-known man. Did you keep in contact with him?
Oh, yes. You see, his wife and my wife were very close. Very close, because they both lived in Virginia Beach, and we were the first ones from Virginia Beach who were shot down.
I see.
So my wife went over and knocked on her door one day and said, "I guess we're the only ones here." And so they became great friends. Jane, who was Commander's wife, and Janie, who was mine, but Jane had 7 children. And so that kept things busy.
Oh, sure.
And she also was very active in the POWMIA wives operation on the East Coast. So our Janie got involved in all of that too, and those people are near and dear to Janie. In fact, when Admiral Denton's wife was very seriously ill, and she's over in Norfolk, and was in the hospital, and it was Thanksgiving, and we got a call, and we drove up there because they knew she was going to die, and so they called Janie,
Sure.
And they were very close that way.
I bet you would be.
Yeah.
The Bill, a couple of the other questions were, coming home, settling in like this, were there people that came home that just clammed up? Now, that's kind of a thing a lot of the Vietnam veterans say they do. They don't want to talk about it because nobody will understand it. And really, in your case, no one would except your fellow POWs. So did a lot of them come home and just...
I don't know how many, but I know that there were some who did. But I tell you, I think the people on the ground in the South that had better reason to not talk about what was going on than we did. In our case, it was, well, for instance, I guess I started out talking to groups right away, and there's some fellows who never did talk to groups.
Yeah, right.
So it varied.
It's very difficult, I'm sure. As I mentioned before, and Bill Dixon did also, please take advantage of this situation tonight with Mr. Bill Tschudy as our guest at 919-518-9773. And we floated 2 questions out before Bill got here tonight for you also to think about. And one is I'm going to say pending trade for Bowie Bergdahl, the POW in Afghanistan, for some of the terrorists in Gitmo. If it's worth talking about, his family's been all over the news, and some people think yes, some say no. And I think I'm going to ask a very learned man what he thinks of this possible trade of a POW for a POW. Mr. Tschudy.
That's a very deep question.
That's a deep question.
Because just the people who are in Gitmo, for whatever reason they're there, we know. And I think I'm always surprised when sarcastically surprised when they say, well, 3 of the people we let go were found in terrorist groups in Iraq and Iran and so on. I said, well, for goodness sakes, did you expect them to, what did you do to convince them that they were wrong and that the right and justice was the way to go? I said, we don't do that. We don't indoctrinate people. So why should these people who after sitting there, should they be so enamored with having their own Koran and eating good food and all that kind of stuff that they'll say, gee, these guys aren't bad at all. I think I'll turn it over. I can tell you, I know about 270 or so guys who spent a lot of years in Vietnam. And if we had been able, but when we got out, we'd get right back in an airplane and go back to war, because they're not going to change.
Okay.
And especially with their background, their traditions, they're not going to. But you're not going to take a hardened criminal and put him in jail, and he'll suddenly say, "Oh, wow, I think I'll be guys." So as far as trading them are concerned, and we're just feeding back into, if we trade those people, we're just feeding them back into the Taliban or whatever they came from. And it's sort of one of those things we can be stalwart about it and say, no, by God, we're not trading anybody. And so this poor guy sits over there for whatever reason. And frankly, I think I can't say before this president's term is over that Gitmo is going to be empty, but we keep doing dumb stuff, and sending just incredible things. So it wouldn't surprise me. I think that the common thinking would be, no, you don't want to do that.
Yeah.
But I think that this war is so poorly attended by the president that he kind of doesn't give a crap.
I think that's a good way to put it.
And in fact, I think he is too empathetic. And so I won't doubt one bit if the command is given to trade. Knowing what it's like to be gone, I wouldn't mind this fellow coming home.
Right.
But anyway, I have no answer to it.
Well, like you said, and I think Bill has mentioned, you might want to chime in on this answer. Mr. Dixon might, because sometimes he called it Pandora's box. You opened up something, you can't get it closed sometimes.
That is true.
And I don't know, I can't think of any reference point in history where we did this for this and it worked. I like your philosophy. They're not going to change.
No. Shoot, no, they'll just as soon trample over us as anything. And so They're bad guys.
Well, Bill, I want to get back to a little bit, if I can, before I give you the second ticklish question. When we're talking about your ordeal is over and you're on the flight, Operation Homecoming. Now, when you landed, did you land in San Diego or was it?
No, we went directly to Clark Air Force Base in the Philippines.
In the Philippines.
And they offloaded us there, and we went to the Clark Hospital. And we were there anywhere from a day to 3 days, just sort of depending when they got done with us, because we were, we didn't have any clothes, so to speak, sure. And so we got uniforms and a lot of checking, your
sure.
teeth and things like that. Nothing serious in terms of debriefings. For some unknown reason, I was the last guy out from my group. And not only that was I the last guy out from my group, that when the plane landed and it was carried on the networks, they showed the picture of everybody coming off, and just as I was going to come off, they panned down and showed somebody's hands or something. So
you missed that.
My wife didn't know I was home for, there were 3 flights that day.
Okay.
And they were about 2 hours apart. And she said, well, we didn't see him. And we kind of didn't hear him. And with a name like mine, if an announcer can avoid it, he will.
yeah, that's a good point.
And if he can avoid it intentionally. So anyway, it turned out that one of the commentators, when the third plane was coming in, one of the commentators said, well, there's a little boy in Virginia Beach who's really happy because his daddy came home on the first airplane. And he told the story because they asked Mike, he said, where do you want to talk to your dad? And he said, in my room.
That's great. That's a good story.
So they didn't know that, and because people were going to the States just as fast as they'd go through this whatever stuff we did at Clark, and for some reason or another, I think it was how aggressive your aide was. And if he went down there and beat on the desk, why, he could. So it turned out that this fellow who was assigned to me to be an aide, his wife was in North Dakota, and she was pregnant and going to be delivering twins at any time. And I didn't blame him for not being very squared away.
Oh, my. A lot of complications, everybody.
I was the last one, and there were 4 of us came back to Virginia Beach, and 3 of them came back really early, and then everybody said, well, where's Tschudy? And they'd say, well, he has some special information they're interested in, because they couldn't figure out why I wasn't home.
Where were you?
And all I was doing was walking around and reading magazines and just waiting to go, and so eventually I got home and everybody was happy.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you were telling me a little bit Friday night about this story. I'd like you to share with our listeners tonight about this car that drove up, this special car. If you wouldn't mind, that was a great story.
Well, we were very interested in almost anything, and of course, growing up, every year they'd say they'd have a car in the showroom with a canvas over it, and then we're going to show you the new Fords today. And it was an event, and so that was very big in my life. And when we got these magazines that they had for us to look through, we looked through and we started seeing these cars that looked pretty nifty and so on, and really didn't know what was what. And so my wife had gone to, I don't know, she was off base somewhere, and she came back to the hospital in Norfolk, area in Newport, in Norfolk area.
Yeah, I got you. Okay.
And anyway, they had a big circular drive that came up to the hospital, and so I went outside and waiting for it, and all of a sudden, this incredibly neat car that, I mean, I came from a two-door sedan family, that kind of thing. And she came slinking up in this green Malibu, two-tone green, and wow, I couldn't believe it. I can still see it now. It was just wonderful. So I said, oh, well, things are really good here.
And you're good.
Yeah. Of course, I got to tell you this one thing. Some of us were able to write back and forth, and you didn't always get all the letters that were written and everything, but everybody over there, all the POWs, felt very generous. And we'd say, gosh, I hope my wife isn't, pinching pennies, and that the kids are getting opportunities to do things. Little did I know. Anyway, this one fellow wrote to his wife and said, make sure the girls have plenty of exposure to things that are going on. Next thing he gets is a photograph in his letter, and here's his wife standing in front of a brand new Cadillac with one of their daughters, and on the the card it said our new car at our new house, and Tschudy isn't here because she's around back in the pool. Now that kind of took a little breath away. We had no idea what things were, and so, oh, okay, yeah, I told you, do whatever you want, and so anyway, that was just one of the crazy things.
How long did you keep that car?
10 years.
Whoa. Very nice.
Absolutely. And at the same time, Mr. McNamara, no, not McNamara, who did we say headed for...
It was Mac.
No, yeah, but before him.
Let's see.
Anyway.
I don't know.
He made sure that all the POWs came back, had a car to use for a year, a Ford automobile to use for a year.
All the POWs got one.
Uh-huh.
Very nice.
And we, they insured us. We had to pay all the, gas and everything, but that was our car. And then at the end of the year, we either turned it back in, or we could negotiate to buy it.
Sure.
So we got that car right away when I came home, and the Chevy was just about a year old, or not even that long. And we kept both those cars for 10 years. And this was back in the days when 100,000 miles was way beyond life. And the Chevy, I mean, to tell you, we didn't have a garage, and we were in Toledo, and that car started every time you touched it. Everybody else was having trouble, but the Chevy just was great.
It's those super sports, those Malibus.
That's right.
Well, Bill, you're home now. You're settling in. And how long after you got home did you stay in the service?
Well, I had about 12 years in when I came home, and I stayed 20. So I was in for 1, 2, 3 more tours of duty. When I came back, I maybe a little bit too soon went to graduate school at Penn, and my first exciting adventure there was I was sitting for my first exam, and I looked at the paper and I said, oh my God, this is the first time that human strength can't overcome wrong answers. You'd always say, well, I can deal with that. And so that was the beginning of an exciting career at the Wharton School. And so we were in Philadelphia for about 2.5 years. And that's when my daughter was born, on the 4th of July in Philadelphia in 1974.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
You got these dates. July 4th, your daughter is born.
Yes.
You're on Time Magazine December 7th.
Yeah.
Pearl Harbor Day, you're on the cover of Time Magazine.
But when my wife was pregnant, we would talk about it, and she said, Mike and I, that's our son, she said, we've been through this together, and it means a whole lot, but when this baby comes, it's all over. You should not going to get involved in all the things that we did. And so she was due on the 28th of June, and all of a sudden, high noon at on the 4th of July, she made her appearance and got more publicity than all of us did. Being born in Philadelphia on the 4th of July.
That's amazing. Now, then, when I first met you, you were at Lake Boone
Yes.
at Sunbelt Enterprises.
Yeah.
Now, what brought that about in your life? How'd you get down this neck of the woods?
Well, I have to tell you that as soon as I got out of the military, I went to Toledo and I worked for a division of Teledyne, and that was a division that built jet engines, and they built jet engines for the Harpoon missile and for the T-37 Air Force trainer, and so I worked there for 4 years, and then I got another job. I swam down the Lake Erie to Buffalo, and got a job with another high-tech aeronautical company called Moog, M-O-O-G. It's not the one with the electronic noisemaker. You know, the Moog guitar is big deal with people. But it wasn't that. He was a cousin. But this was electro-hydraulic servo actuators. Make flaps and slats on airplanes go up and down. And they also built all the actuators that made the space shuttle work. And it was a very interesting business. And I was with them for 7 years.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden, the Berlin Wall came down. And as we were meant to say, peace broke out.
Yeah, I heard it. Peace broke out. The Cold War's over.
And the company, in their wisdom, said, well, all you guys who have military in front of your name, and I was military sales and marketing, we're not going to need you anymore because all we're going to do is civilian stuff with Boeing and so on. And so why don't you go over to the paymaster and pick up your pay and get out of town? And so we had a friend who was down here, and the funny thing was that our friend in North Carolina had told us how nice it was down here, and we thought, why don't we take time off and go down there, and maybe we look around and see what it's all about.
Sure.
And then I told Janie, I said, there's some rumors about there are going to be layoffs, and while we're gone, and I think I ought to be here. And so I was here, and I was one of them that laid off.
You're right.
And anyway, so I looked for a job. I was in a placement operation and found one here in Raleigh. And it was with a privately owned business that this man had built from the ground up. It was interesting because they made the commercial ice maker.
I see.
And they also made processing material for poultry processing plants. It was very interesting. It was very civilian. And he and I didn't agree to agree. And so that lasted, I think, 4 months or something. And then I was on my own, and I saw an ad in the paper from a fellow in Charlotte who was looking for a franchise holder or opener here in Raleigh in the business brokerage business.
There you go.
So they didn't have one, so I said, hey, that looks like a good idea. So that's what I did, and that's how I got here. I mean, I was here, but what surprised me when we were up in Buffalo, I was laid off. I was with all these guys from Xerox and Eastman Kodak that had been laid off for one reason or another. And I found out then these guys had all gone up to their executive positions because they were lifelong members of their companies.
Uh-huh.
They didn't know diddly how to write a resume, and they didn't know how to look for jobs. They didn't know how to do anything. So, and every time I'd find an announcement, hey, there's somebody over in Cleveland that wants to talk to people. Anybody want to go? Oh, no. They said, oh, what's this? And I said, leave Buffalo?
Well, that's changed.
I said, well, guys, if you get anyone, give them to me because I'm ready to go. And then when we came down to Raleigh and I was laid off with my job down here, I said, I'm not leaving this town.
Okay.
It's going to be a place for me. So anyway, that's how I got down here.
Sun
For
Belt
22
Industries.
years now.
Well, that's 33 years. That's when I first met you down there when you were there on Lake Boone Trail.
Yeah.
We were there. Well, we are running a little. We have about 5 minutes left. And Bill, do you have any questions you want to get? Bill, tonight, come on over.
Bill, it's an honor to have you on the show again and have you Friday night. What I wanted to ask you was, you were on your 13th mission.
Yes.
And where were you in the mission? Were you finishing up or just starting the mission?
We had just dropped our bomb
It just dropped your bomb. Now, were you hit by a SAM or
anti-aircraft.
an aircraft? Okay. When you were hit, and the question I wanted to ask, you hit, what's your first thought? Besides, oh crap.
Disbelief. No, yeah.
First you say it, then you do it.
Yeah.
Well, if you had the job that I had on the airplane, you're looking at a radar scope, and you got your head in here, and so things go on around you, and you don't know. And all of a sudden, I got hit on the knee, and my pilot says, "Get out of the airplane." And I looked around, and I looked out the window, and I saw this brown smoke going over the wings and everything, and he says, "Get out, I'm going." And he went, and then I went. And so on the way down, it was very nice, quiet, and my first thought was, my God, here I am. I'm parachuting into enemy territory, and the enemies are Asians, and they're communists. I don't think I can think of any worse combination than that. And so when I hit the ground, everything proved true. But I also really computed that whatever the war was in the South, we hadn't had anything to do with it. We were only doing north bombing. And I said, I don't know or care what's going on with the war. I know where my war is, and that's a war of survival. And hence the journey began.
Yeah. Well, how far apart were you and Jeremiah Denton when y'all came down? Were you pretty close together, or?
He landed. There was the Songmile River. That's where we were. Is this bridge that went over the river, and he apparently landed in that river because he popped his life raft, and he was floating down the river, and the V were on each side, on the levees on the side, pointing guns at him and telling him, pulling him, trying to get him ashore. But I really didn't see him. As soon as my chute opened and I was out of my ejection seat, I looked around. I didn't see the plane. I didn't see him. I have no idea whether I was upside down or backward. The only thing I do remember is coming down on my chute and watching some A4 Skyhawks go over, and I'd say, "Oh, guys, drop your tail hook and just take me out."
Snag me.
And well, that's the way it all began.
Yeah. And of course, you had a welcome committee by the time you hit the ground.
Well, that's another funny story. Here I am, a navigator, and I'm got this parachute that I can't control, and I landed right in the middle of a village.
So they didn't have to go far to find you then.
I'll tell you not. And there's some funny things about it. This area we are around Hanoi, down south, about 45 clicks out of Hanoi, is all rice paddies. It's the short plain, and the littoral is like East Carolina here. And so whenever there's an air raid, all the people go out to the rice paddies, and they disperse there, and they evacuate their villages. And anyway, I'm coming down, and I look down, and I said, "Oh my God, it's a village," or a type thing. And as I come down, I'm all ready to make a parachute landing, nice roll, so I don't break any legs or anything. And all of a sudden, I'm upright, but I'm on the ground. And it turned out that my parachute had caught up in palm trees, and there was just enough length that I touched the ground. But then I looked around and I found out I was standing in a trench, and the trench was about 2.5 feet wide and about 6 feet long and about butt deep. And all I could think of is it's a grave. And I said, they really knew I was coming. And so there I was in this hole, and I looked up, and there was, and mind you, your mind is trained to see things that are more common in your world, and this band of, I don't want to call them midgets, but this band of very small men, just wearing shorts and swinging machetes over their heads, came storming into this village, and they were ready to chop me up in little pieces. But there was a taller fella who had an AK-47, and he was a militiaman, and he was obviously in control. These people were pissed because we dropped bombs on them. And so there I was, and it was hands up yank and all this sort of stuff, and they took the machete, and they're going to cut my risers. Wait, because I knew if they kill me in the process, that's okay. Well, you just pop those little Sierra fittings, and the risers go off, and so there I was, and they jabbed me a couple of times. Now, mind you, I'm standing in this hole, and they're standing here, and we're just about eye to eye, and so they get me out, and they see. And so then they take my clothes, and of course one of the things was we wear a G-suit, and the G-suit is around your legs and so on, and it has a nice emergency release because the zipper goes right up, and right at the crotch, you just pull it, and the zipper falls apart. Well, they didn't know that, and they were going to take it off of me with their machetes. Mm-hmm. So once again, I said, whoa, 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 and I popped that off, and they loved it. But the thing that was most fun was in the airplane, you have this hose that hooks onto the system that inflates the G-suit when the airplane pulls G's, and it fled. So, oh boy, they saw this thing, it's a hose, and they thought, oh, this is good. So they stood there and they hacked and whacked at it, and it was a U.S. spec XXX, and there's wires and rubber tubes and just all kinds of stuff, and so they finally got it off, and I said, watch, and all you had to do was grab it and turn it, and it would have come off, but that's okay. They can siphon gas with it anyway. Yeah. So then all of a sudden they realized, and they put me back down in the hole so that I would be eye level with them.
Yeah. We're running real short on time, but I got one more question. Everybody thinks of everybody who went to was a prisoner of war in North Vietnam were all at No Hilton. How many different camps were you at?
Well, they had. Gosh, I don't know how many it was, but they had outlying camps, 6 or 7 of them, and each one of those had 30 or 40 people in it. And some, they were in the country. One was in an old film studio in town. Another one was in some of us thought had been a school where they taught mechanics. Some of us were at the power plant, the one and only power plant they had in town, and then there was another one we called Alcatraz, and they had very special people they put in there. So all these things were kind of going on at the same time, and so it wasn't until just toward the end that they brought us into Hanoi, and that was because our good friends down here, the Special Forces, came in to rescue us at the camp called Son-Tay. And we weren't there, but it scared the life out of the Vietnamese. And they panicked, and they moved us all back into Hanoi and put us into the big prison there. And then we were in large cell blocks that were about 61 feet long and 21 feet wide. And
how long was the time since they moved you before the Son-Tay raid?
about a month.
About a month?
That was as I said, that was the only humane thing they did, was because there's a river right outside that went right around the prison, but there was no rain, and the only water was just this incredibly red, dirty water, and they couldn't keep it in. I will say they let us dig a well. They had us dig a well, and we dug this well, and the next day it rained. The well was filled up, and the day after that it stopped raining. The well was empty. So, but we just didn't have any. They didn't have enough water to cook or do anything. So they had another camp. They were always building camps, and we said the day they stopped building, it's the day the war is over. And sure enough.
You know, Bob and I were both married about 3 years when we went to Vietnam. And how long were you married before you were shot down?
2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's phenomenal. It's a very special lady to hang in there for 7.5 years and then put up with you when you came back and your acclimation. And I know what it just was for my wife. And that's a little time I was gone. And that's a very special lady.
Well, that's true. And, of course, with the sea services, and I don't know exactly how the ground forces do it, but when we go to sea, then you make allotments to your wife, and she takes over the bill paying and all that sort of stuff. So when you get shot down, she just keeps on doing it.
And she was one of the, I guess she was probably one of the first to get started in National League of Families.
Yeah.
The POW network.
Well, there were two things. Well, the person that gets the most attention is Sybil Stockdale from the West Coast, and she is an aggressive person. She was Admiral Stockdale's wife.
Yeah.
And so she mixed it up out there, but we had the ladies here had gathered together and were doing things. They just hadn't thought of going national, and so then everybody met up saying, "Oh, are you too?" You know. Mm-hmm. But those were where the bases were, the Navy bases, and they were in.
I have a really tough assignment for you, though.
Okay. All
right, but I know you can handle it. I would like for you to have your wife be our guest on April 9th show, because I think she would be an absolutely fantastic guest to come in and talk about her time and so forth. And we're asking you to ask her to come on the show, because she is a special lady, and I enjoyed talking with her and meeting her Friday night, and I'd really like to.
Well, if you had been in our house for 53 years, you would know that my asking her isn't going to move her one bit.
I understand that. I'm getting ready to hit my 50th anniversary myself, and I understand that. But
I know that.
So what is the date? The 12th?
April 12th was be our first regular time, and we'd love to have her come in and just sit down and talk and relax. And
well, you know, I'd be happy to. In fact, I would be happy to give her a heads up on it, and if one of you slick-tongued devils would call her.
Well, that would be Bob Matthews. He is Mr. Diplomat, and so we'll have Bob call her and talk to her, and he's one of those suave talkers. So.
Yeah, that's right. And I can guarantee you that by that time I'll know how to get here.
All right. Or we'll be glad to go pick her up. Either way. All right. And I got one more thing for. I know we're running over time, but I just got one more question for you. You know, we're going back to Vietnam in May to build a playground, and I know you aren't interested in going back. What we'd like to do is we have offered people an opportunity to buy a plaque to put on the playground equipment in honor of, in memory of, or whatever. And North Carolina Vietnam Veterans Incorporated would like to purchase a plaque in your name in honor of Bill Tschudy and put on the playground equipment, if that's okay with you.
Well, it is, but it's undeserving.
That's not for you to decide. We've already decided that, and something we'd like to do. What we're doing is we're asking people $250 for a plaque to help us offset the cost since our shipping just doubled. And what we'd like to do is, in North Carolina Vietnam Veterans, buy a plaque in your honor and make sure it gets there. That's the way you get to see South Vietnam, since you never got to see it otherwise.
That's right.
Yeah.
Doggone.
We'd have Bill Tschudy in South Vietnam instead of North Vietnam.
Take a picture.
All right, we're going to do that and bring it back to you. But we just wanted to make sure it was okay with you. And
Listen, let me inject something.
Okay.
What you guys are doing is great, but when you talk about memorials and things, if you're ever up in Virginia Beach, go down to the end of, I think it's Lasky Road, and they have the most incredible statuary of, I think it's just Navy, Marine Corps, but of people who were in action figures, and it is incredible. They did it.
I've heard of the place. Have not been there. I've heard of the place.
It's very nice, and I bought a plaque.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, Bill, again, thank you very much for being on with us again. We'll have to get you back another time right after we have your wife in. But this is our show for tonight. I appreciate those of you tuned in, and those of you who watch it later on the archives. You can't ask Bill questions right then, but if you have questions, let us know, and we'll get the questions to Bill. Our next show would be Norman Gaddis, who was also a POW. And after that would be the March 26th. We'll have Kerry Turner in, who will be talking about his cousin, Joseph Hargrove, and getting his remains back. Thank you very much for our show, and y'all have a good evening.
Wonderful. Listen, that.
You are tuned to the Nissan Communications Network. Our weekly lineup of call-in programs includes Computers 2K Now with Amnon Nissan, Health In with Debbie Bruck, Breaking Free with Marilyn Shannon, Lessons of Vietnam with NCVVI members, The Tanya Love Show, Reawaken Your Brilliance with Julie Seibert, and if you tuned in too late, you can always watch each program in its entirety or download an MP3 audio file of it at www.nissancommunications.com. Sponsored by Atomus.com, makers of quality video recorders and converters for professionals. ThatVidBlasterGuy.com, CarolinaApparel.com, and DeltaForce.net.